Welcome back to DealBook. We have a very special and important conversation to be had this afternoon, and I am thrilled to have the privilege to spend some time with our following guests. My goal with this next conversation, and I want to be very clear, is to discuss some real concrete steps that this audience that's with us, the thousands, tens of thousands that are now with us, and corporate America can really take to try to create some lasting change and benefits for minorities in this country, and really finally try to close the inequality gap in the boardroom and in people's paychecks. Ursula Burns is here. I should tell you that she was the first and only female CEO of a black female CEO of a Fortune 500 company when she ran Xerox. Today she's a member of Uber's board. She's a senior advisor to Teneo, and I've had the honor and pleasure to have known her now for quite some time, and we've had some very important discussions over that time. Also with us, Robert Smith, founder, chairman, and CEO of Vista Equity Partners. He is the wealthiest Black American in this country, and I should tell you, and you probably know, you watched the day that he really ended a student debt crisis, if you will, at Morehouse, and we're going to talk about that and so much more. He has what's called the 2% solution, and we're going to discuss that as well. And then we also have Michael Render. He is Killer Mike, co-founder of Greenwood, which is a mobile banking platform. He is a rapper and entrepreneur, and he is somebody who moved me and so much of this country after George Floyd's murder earlier this year, when he gave a speech impromptu in Atlanta. And if you haven't seen it, you must. I just rewatched it, and Michael, I have to tell you, it will literally bring you to tears every time. But it's so moving and such an important commentary on where we are in this country and frankly, all the work that we have to do. And I want to talk about that work and what we need to do. And talking about that work, let me start with Robert, if I could, to talk a little bit about this 2% solution, because you have been very public in talking about this, and I think having success in corporate America, because people and companies are starting to do this. So why don't you tell everybody what it is that you're advocating and what they're doing?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. And good to see you. And Ursula and Mike, always good to see you both. The thing that we have learned is that there has really been a systemic removal of goods and services from the Black community for generations. And when you start thinking about the irony of it, the opportunity is for corporations to now deliver back into these communities. I'll call it infrastructure for economic development. I think about, most importantly, creating a capital base to permanently close these racial wealth gaps. And really, this 2% solution takes from the tradition among many American families who, on average, donate about 2% of their income to charity. So what we're saying is, let's call upon top U.S. companies across key sectors of the economy to invest 2% of their net income over the next 2 years aimed at closing these racial wealth gaps. And if you think about it, if you actually take companies that have industry-based initiatives aligned with what they do, you have the ability to drive their best thinking, their best use of their assets and resources to solve some of the problems in areas like modernizing banking systems in African-American communities, eliminating the food deserts in these communities, healthcare deserts, education deserts. And we have the capability, know-how to do it. It's really just a function of now, how do you bring capital? One argument is you say 2% of net income, or you take a unique approach that Bank of America did, and they offered a bond. And the bond's called a Quality Progress Sustainability Bond. And with these low interest rates, they were able to issue about $2 billion of this bond and actually drive this sort of capital into supply chain finance, affordable housing, deposits, and investments in minority development institutions or depository institutions, and invest in minority VC and PE funds. So if you think about it, it's really turning part of their economic activity into the communities that need it most. And by the way, it's not just a moral imperative, it's an economic one. It'll add $1.5 to $2 trillion to our country's GDP. So that's really, in a nutshell, components of it. And we've been working with everyone from the Business Roundtable, McKinsey, Dell, Microsoft, AT&T, Verizon, a number of partners to now actually start to deliver these solutions in effective instances throughout the communities throughout the U.S.
Just to follow up, though, speak to the issue. And you just said it. It's not just a moral imperative; it's an economic one. But speak to the economic imperative or the market opportunity, if you will, for the companies that are engaged in this, because this isn't philanthropy.
Right, right. I mean, if you think about it, all Americans really want certain things. African Americans in particular want, really to pursue their dreams without the hindrance of racism. We want to raise our kids safely. We want to send them to great schools. We want our communities to have, opportunities to work, which means in many cases funding entrepreneurs, because that's typically where most of our jobs come from. We want healthcare. We want, great parks and lovely houses and affordable markets and good food. And all of that means if you create the capital inflows into those communities, it becomes utilized effectively. And by the way, consumption goes up, lifestyle goes up. And that creates really a call it a virtuous cycle. Right. That we all as Americans can now embrace. I'm the world of software, and I tell people all the time, the real challenge is there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. Only 29 million of us know how to write code, and we have to activate all 350 million plus people in the United States to be effective contributors to our economy. Well, you can't do that if you starve them of resources, like education, which I think is the biggest gap. And and healthcare and nutritious food and access to opportunities. If you do that well, then the economic effects in those communities are better skills, right, more contribution to the productivity of America, which actually makes us a more competitive country. Right. We really have 350 million people.
But how do you?
We're competing in countries that are 5 and 6 times bigger.
I get the macro argument. I think we all get the macro argument. Question is, how do you persuade people on the micro? Meaning, a company is going to have to make an investment decision. They have a cost of capital. They want to make X percent. Can they make more over here, or can they make more over here? Right.
Simple examples, Andrew. Look, one of our company's services provides learning management systems for schools, and what we did is we looked at all 13,000 school districts that are customers of ours and said, all right, here's where there are deserts. 36% of African-American communities actually don't have broadband access, which means the kids don't have access to learning management systems and being able to effectively learn during this time of COVID. I mean, that's what COVID brought out, so starkly. But if you actually go into those communities and put broadband in as a broadband provider, point number one, now the school districts will be able to teach their kids and pay part of the rate that it takes for the broadband. Oh, by the way, it also enables telemedicine. So now healthcare companies have an ability to create an economic opportunity in those communities. And oh, by the way, it provides broadband infrastructure for businesses, small to medium businesses, which when small to medium businesses utilize software, it's about a 900% ROI. Right. Because they can become more efficient, more effective, and actually create more jobs in those communities. And when you everyone knows, when you have an increased economic activity in a community, it becomes safer. Right. It becomes more, a better place. The increase in the value of the houses and the real estate goes up, which creates more mortgage activity. It's all, we've seen this so many times before, but now the question is, how do we make sure it hits every one of the African-American communities and Latinx communities that have been starved of resources for so long?
Ursula, do you think we've had this conversation, unfortunately, for far too long, you and I, over the years? Do we feel that this is an inflection point? I recognize it's a journey. It's a journey that's taking as I said, far too long, but where are we in it, do you think?
Yeah. I think that we are at a very important and high opportunity point. I think this is probably the most excited and optimistic I felt in a long time. And it comes from some of the worst situations that we have, right? The murder of a man by the police, a pandemic that has literally disrupted the lives of the world, but the poorest people, the people who need the most help in the world, and a government structure that is not supporting bringing us together and solving the problems. What's happened out of that is that people, regular guys, right? The regular people who walk the streets, me, Robert, Killer Mike, you, but also my kids, people who march in the street have realized that they can't leave it to anybody else anymore. They have to kind of get involved, that they have to be involved. So before we had, I love this statement, that Lin-Manuel made famous, before we had these moments where everybody got into the moment and then we went back to our normal way of living, because of the pandemic and because of the discourse that we feel, this lack of, this kind of pulling apart, the moments are becoming a movement now. So even if we decided to not have this discussion, there is enough disruption today in the system sprinkled around the United States and fortunately around the world that we're not going to be able to slow it down. I don't think we're at the point yet where we can just kind of all turn away, but we're getting close. So if we stop talking, I think that there'll still be a level of energy, but we have to talk a little bit longer and be engaged a little bit longer. We have to do the 2% solution. We literally have to speak up when we see injustice, when we see lack of opportunity, when we see literally people being left out of participation. We have to speak up and be very aggressive about it. One of the things that we did was started this thing called the Board Diversity Action Alliance, which, this is simple. It's really straightforward. After George Floyd is killed, I get a call. I fly home, I land on the day and find out that this man had been murdered by the police. Get settled in, take a shower, I get a call from a CEO of a very large company. And he says, you heard what happened? Yeah, I need to talk to you. I said, okay, fine, what about? He said, I think I got this kind of well understood, but I feel I'm missing something. What is this thing and something? He said, people are in the street marching. White people, young people, Asian people, Black people are marching because this guy got killed who nobody even knew, nobody heard of. What's happening? And my first response to him was, why are you calling me? Thank you for calling me, but why are you calling me? Why don't you call your board members or management team? He said, because we have no African-American or African board members or management team. And talked to a lot of CEOs during that time. Myself, Darren, all of us got these calls, I'm sure. All of the Black leaders got these calls. What I realized was they shouldn't have to call us. They should be able to look in their rooms and literally pick up the phone to their board members, to their C-suite executives that have experiences, that know, that are closer to the action, that are part of the movement, and engage them. And the Board Diversity Action Alliance, one Black director, one Latinx director, at least, right? On all of the boards of the Fortune 500, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, I don't care. We have to have representation because without representation, you have blind spots. If you don't have diversity, you have blind spots. So 2% solution, Board Diversity Action Alliance. I love Killer Michael's thing. Plot, plan, strategize, organize, mobilize. I love this.
Absolutely.
This is not part of we have to do that to every single problem, every opportunity that we have. We have to use these 5 action verbs, literally, to move the solution to the problem along. So I think that we're at a point where there's too much excitement. It's gotten too broadly dispersed to actually kind of clamp it down. We're not over the point yet, but we're getting damn close.
Absolutely.
Mike, contextualize this for everybody, because you've been on this journey.
I'm a product of the wish list. So let me, first of all, I know the rapper shows up in the baseball cap. This is my company. And so I want people to know, like Ursula said, you better find out a way to monetize it. I own a barber shop that we're trying to grow, and we're going to grow, and we're going to compete with places like Great Clips and Sports Clips called the Swag Shop. But I didn't have a haircut. And Ursula and Robert have a much better haircut than me. So I decided to do my cap. I am a product of what they're talking about. Well, Michael, how are you a product if this is something that's never done? Well, Atlanta is a very unique place. So for over 120 years, Atlanta has been a place of economic opportunity and prosperity. Now, the conundrum is Atlanta is just like America. It's a chocolate version of America. So although we still have high income inequality, for the most part, all of your heroes and villains in my lifetime have been Black people. We had an amazing mayor in Maynard Jackson before I was born in the early 70s, who mandated that 29 to 30% of city contracts you want to deal with the city of Atlanta had to be with Black and minority-owned businesses. This allowed for companies like the Herman Russell, which was a construction and development company, to grow. Now that company is now in the tech field and helping people do that, partnering with bigger corporations and companies. That, though, started in the 70s. Before that, you had as early as 1948, the neighborhood I grew up in called the Collier Heights was a neighborhood of mixed income Black neighborhood. Everyone from Herman Russell to Billy McKinney to Major Ball lived there. And then you had all these working class Black folks like my grandparents who lived there. Because I grew up in that mixed community that was gentrified for Black people, they pushed poor white people further out west to Austell. They took this neighborhood. The schools that I went to were comparable to rich kids' schools. I went to Collier Heights Elementary. I went to Frederick Douglass High School. And I then went, thanks to Andy and Gene Young, I went to Morehouse College on a scholarship that they created for me to go. I got an opportunity to receive the best education possible because the tax base was a great tax base because you had people who were rich, to be very frank there. I got an opportunity to be educated in an environment where I was not a minority. I didn't have to get bussed anywhere. So I was comfortable in where I was. So I say if you want to put 2 Black people on your board, that's even better than 1, because a lot of times you just get to be lonely being the only Black person in the room and the only person getting that phone call at 3 a.m. But Michael Render sits here before you today, not only as someone who sings and dances, but as a person who was being mentored by some of the best business minds out of my community. Once I decided I wanted to go into business and I married a very business-minded woman, I'm sitting here because the city that I grew up in was started, well, not the city was started, but people like John Wesley Dobbs, people like Alonzo Herndon, people like Herman Russell, people like Maynard Jackson, people like former Mayor Kasim Reed understood the importance of private and public cooperation for the betterment. So the investment that my grandparents made in 1952 ended up helping me as a kid who went into kindergarten in 1980. So they had the ability to see that if I invest and plant this seed right now, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, it's not only going to be fruitful to me because my house is going to go up in equity. It's not only going to be fruitful to my community because my community is going to have a stronger tax base with better schools. It's going to be fruitful to these children that are walking up and down my street. Well, how did it become fruitful to us? Michael Render not only became a person who sang and danced for a living, he became a jobs provider and business owner, small and medium business owner. Chief Judge Asha Jackson of DeKalb County was my schoolmate, has written a program that is about restorative justice that the state is picking up now. You have Torchette Fulton, who also was a year behind us, who is now married to a copyright lawyer. And they go around helping us start businesses, whether it's a Williams Fried Chicken or Church's Chicken or Popeyes. Mac Wilburn, who was not one of my classmates, an older guy, but he's a person that's giving good advice to my class. You have people that graduated with me. Cameron Dollar, UCLA champion, is now a coach. I got a chance to be around a pedigree of children that thought this high because the potential and that we heard about was all around us. All we saw was success or failure based on choice. Wasn't based on race. The kids that went to school with me that chose to congregate with the kids who were studying, that chose to go to college, fared better. The children who chose not to didn't. And because we were in Atlanta, we didn't have the excuse to say, well, it's simply racism. Now, that doesn't mean racism didn't exist. Didn't mean systemic racism didn't pull grocery stores out of our community. It did. It didn't mean it didn't pull banks out of our community. It did, which is part of the reason when Andy Young and Ryan Glover gave me the call, I jumped at a chance for Greenwood because I understand how important banking is. My grandmother marched me in a bank at 5 years old, opened up my first bank account. My sister, who paid the most attention to her as an accountant and makes much more money than I ever did my first days of rapping. My sister, who went to trade school, who understood the importance of education post-secondary, also has done well for herself. So for me, I am a product of what we're talking about today. I'm a product of self-reliance. I'm a product of public and private cooperation, whether that was Ted Turner and his programs with the Hawks and the Braves when I was a kid. And I'm a product of belief in oneself and turning the dollar in the African-American community. The Exxon that we went to as children was owned by Miss Barber, who was a Black woman. The grocery stores that we went to were owned by Black people. And that doesn't mean that we had a problem with shopping with other people or even corporations. It meant that the dollars we put back in that community were immediately put back into our community, whether it was supporting education and sports programs, whether it was partnering. Mac Wilburn, who I talked about, who has the #1 selling, Popeyes, of course, has helped many young people in this community who had the wherewithal to start their own businesses to help. So for me, it is about doing what made me. And that is keeping that dollar in our community longer. And people have to remember, too, that if the Black community is stronger economically, like Robert was saying and like Ursula's alluded to, the greater community gets bigger. I watched an interview with Paul Robeson the other day in 1960. Paul Robeson was a phenomenal actor. He was a phenomenal athlete, but he understood that I am first an African American, right? I'm an African by birth. We were kidnapped, we were brought here, but I'm an American and I have something to contribute to this country. If America will simply water this side of the garden, I promise you, your return will be 10, 20, 100-fold anything that you ever thought. And sitting right here before you today is a product of that.
I am so glad that we have you as part of this conversation, because that was such a brilliant articulation of all of this. Let me try, if I can, to break some of it down, if I can. And I want to ask Robert, because one of the things you're hearing from Michael is the education story, and the other is keeping that money in the system. And those are two issues that I know you've been working on. We just talked about the 2% solution. Let's talk about the education piece and what you think has to happen. As you very well know, there's also an effort in Washington right this moment to potentially cut some student debt, which could be a very good thing across the country. But I imagine you think it should be done. Well, I won't tell you how I imagine it. How will you imagine it should be done?
Look, we need to free our young people from this crushing debt. The short answer, in the African American community specifically, a staggering 65% of the wealth of African American families goes towards servicing student loan debt. And you think about it, many of our families don't have the options of actually going and using the equity in their homes and borrowing at low cost. So they actually have to turn to some of the Parent Plus loans and private loans, which typically have a higher interest rate, which typically doesn't abate based on where their jobs are located. And African Americans, unfortunately, when they leave college, typically take a little less money and have a little more debt on average. And so that cycle is frankly a spiral. And if you have a sick parent, you change your job, and those payments are still due. And so that's a problem. So part of what we have to do is actually think holistically about it and say, well, listen, the vast majority of the student loan debt gets paid back to the federal government. So this is in the federal government's hands to solve, and they can solve. And there's private people like myself and others who are looking for other, innovative solutions. But the right answer is to free our young people so that they can do things like become, not be crushed with student loan debt, borrow money to start a business, start on their wealth creation and buying a home or buying securities or areas that actually create long-term economic benefit for their community. And if you graduate from Morehouse and you want to be a teacher, you should be able to go become a teacher and support a lifestyle to teach other kids, like my kids, his grandkids, et cetera, in a way that you have a comfortable lifestyle. You can live in the same communities as those kids. Those kids see you as an African-American teacher. In my life, and many of you know I'm a chemical engineer, I have never had an African-American science teacher my entire life.
Neither have I.
Okay.
Neither have I.
Right?
I'm a mechanical engineer. I've never had an African-American science or math teacher.
Right. The only African-American science teacher, I'll call it instructor, I had was a man in my neighborhood who took a group of us and taught us about rocketry in the 70s. And 3 out of the 8 kids that were in that rocket club became engineers. Now, he did this, wasn't getting paid for it. He just did it out of, I'll call it the goodness of his heart, to actually teach these young African-American kids about science. Now, you think about that dynamic. I would love to see more of our kids have the opportunity to become teachers in our neighborhoods. But if they're crushed with student loan debt and they can't become teachers, they have to go take a job that they have to pay the bills. That, I think, is a travesty. Right. So that's one of the areas that we need to focus on. And the federal government can make changes to this. And that's one of the areas I've been pushing on specifically.
Right. Mike Bloomberg.
Amen.
I was going to say, Mike Bloomberg recently made a big donation to some of the black colleges on the medical side to create more and more doctors, in large part because he argues that they will actually stay in the community, which I think is a remarkably important thing. Ursula, let me ask you about pipeline. And the reason I'm connecting pipeline to education is one of the things you often hear, especially at the most senior levels, but even at junior levels, people say, "Oh, there's no pipeline. They don't exist. We can't find these people who should be on the boards or should be at these levels. There's an education problem," and they right? You know the story. You believe it or
story. You know the story, Andrew. You don't have to tell me. I know the story. Let me make it easy for you. You don't have to ask the question. I'll say the answer before you even ask the question. I love the story, and this is the story. We have a playing field that I designed. This white man designed this playing field. We have a set of referees that are the white guys. We have the rules that the white guys wrote. We have all of the judgment in the long term that are done by this group of people. And then you say, you, Robert, Ursula, Michael, you have to go play on that field, and we'll judge whether or not you can make it out of that playing field and fit into our space. If you lay out the pipeline with that narrow set of rules, I guarantee you, you will not have a lot of participation of women, of Hispanics, of Blacks, of anything other than the rule makers, the structure layout. So I say, there are people there, they're there. You just have to change the way that you look at what the requirements are. I'm not saying that the people shouldn't be able to read and write, have college degrees, et cetera, but I always hear, we need a board member. I love this one. We need a board member. I say, well, fine, we want a Black board member. I said, well, I can give you some. No. They have to be a past or sitting CEO. You say, okay, there are 11 guys who I can give you that can fill that position, 15 maybe. You don't need me to find them. Why? All of the boards that we're looking at, all of the board members are not past or sitting CEOs. Why for the Black board member do we have that narrow set of requirements specified? So what I say is, we do have talent out there, obviously, that can serve on boards. We did it with women. When there were no women in the UK and in California, they mandated women miraculously in a year. In a year and a half, we go from 8% to 30%. Trust me, they weren't born yesterday, they were always there. What I say, open up your aperture, look at talent in the broadest sense of the word, and I guarantee you, you can fill every single spot on the boards that are out there with Black or brown people, with Latinos, Latinx people, with you name it. So I say change the rules, not lower the standard, change the rules, change the definitions, and you'll be able to find it. That's for the top. I'm really comfortable with the top. The bottom, Robert said it. We have economic, food, and God help me, educational deserts out there where literally you can pick a zip code. I think we've talked about this before. I can pick a zip code. You give me that zip code and I can tell you for sure whether a child born in that zip code will get out of high school. We know it has nothing to do with what the family wants, how smart the kid is. It is the structure and funding of the schools, the teachers, the infrastructure. Literally no one outside of that community cares about that zip code. So they fund it, they don't fund it. So I say at the beginning, you have to fund education. You have to make it a priority. Parents have to get involved. Believe it or not, they do. You know the Harlem Children's Zone story. It's amazing. Harlem, all of the kids want to go to school in Harlem now because literally they made it, it's a cycle of good action and good behavior. So we have to stay close to home. We have to literally have, at the beginning pipeline, it's all about education. It's all about opportunities, all about mentorship. It's about examples. At the top, I say there is no excuse. Fine, I will train them all if you need to. The three of us, Michael, we will take them all and get them ready for board service. This is no more excuses here. Just get the people in there. In the middle, literally, it is a change of mind and a change of heart. We have to, no more excuses. No, literally, we have to absolutely punish people. And this is where I get into quotas. Punish people who do not perform, just like we do at profit and loss. Literally, if you spill dirt into the water, you get fined. If you lose a whole lot of money, you get fired. If you do not diversify your company inside, then there should be some negative consequences for that. And that's what I think that we as consumers, we as pressure people have to make sure it's clear what we expect. We expect diversity throughout the company. And I don't believe, I know for a fact that at the top, it is not about they don't exist. It's that you're not looking in the right places to find them.
Michael, help me with this. Where do you land on quotas? Because quotas, I will tell you, as you know, it's a controversy. There's a lot of controversy when you say the word quota. So I just want to know, what do you think?
Well, it's only controversy when you talk about Black folk.
That's right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't no controversies on quotas when they was doing land giveaways in the middle of America, and they needed Eastern Europeans who were used to the weather. It wasn't a problem with quotas when this country was started. You know what I mean? They were like, you know what? We don't want to play taxes to UK. We need to make sure not only for the planter class in the South, we needed to make sure the new people that were Irish, that were coming, that were a little too friendly with black folk, we need to find somewhere to put them so that they can achieve whiteness and they can forget this camaraderie amongst class with poor people. Interesting in what's been just said again. I didn't know this, but I'm a walking, talking example of possibility. Doesn't make me better or worse. It just means the things that they're proposing have been done in my life. I had 3 white teachers my entire life. One of them wasn't even mine. That was just a classroom I went to visit my cousin at. Like, man, Miss Allen sure is nice. She ain't scared of black folks. And so I only had 1 white science teacher my entire life, Mr. Stam. He was so scared of black kids that until we pulled him to the side, like, man, you got to teach us, man. We know we bigger than you, but you got to teach us. But my science teacher, most powerful influence in my life, was a woman much like Ursula. Her name was Miss Wilder. And Miss Wilder didn't play. You came in her class, you got it together. So the Atlanta that I grew up in, which has changed though, the Atlanta that I grew up in produced me, produced more than 4 sitting city council members, I believe now. It produced our mayor. It produced T.I., who's probably the most wordy rapper I've ever seen in my life, and one of my best friends. So when the system works, what happens is you have kids that came out of historically black colleges and universities. They then taught in the schools that I was taught in. My 6th grade teacher lived 10 houses from me, so I didn't have an excuse to do bad. She just knocked on my grandmother's door. She lived in that neighborhood because her loan was underwritten by Citizens Trust Bank. So a black bank took historically black college and university graduates, underwrote them to live in the community they taught in. So there was a sense of responsibility and accountability. So by the time I was 13, 14, I couldn't bullshit about my education. I had to take it seriously because by then I understood the amount of sacrifice and work that I had put into it. Now, prior to my graduating, Frederick Douglass High School had only been run by 2 principals. Alonzo Krim, Lester Butts, who replaced Alonzo Krim as school superintendent at one point, and then Dr. Hill, who was much like a Joe Clark-like figure. So in the middle of the crack era, he has a national school of excellence. When other schools are falling off, in Atlanta is a school system where 65, 70% of the schools are named for black educators and emancipators. So I had the responsibility of knowing I'm walking into Frederick Douglass High School. Without struggle, there is no progress. That is the quote we had to say every day. So I could not say to myself, oh, it's somebody else's fault. I had to take self-accountability at that point. So I had a strong, stable base in that the community I lived in housed my teachers, firemen, policemen. I had self-determination with the circle of kids that I was in. And I thought I wanted to be a thug. I wanted to be a rapper. But my friends said we going to college. I was like, man, I want to try this college thing out too, Asha. Chief Judge Asha Jackson. I want to go to college too. I took self-accountability, and then my grandparents only dealt in businesses that were good for us, to us, to by our community. So as Ursula was talking about in terms, and Robert is saying, in terms of even black business, I define the black business by 3 ways. It's either totally owned and operated by black people and good to my community, or it's not owned by black people, but it employs black people and it is good to my community. And lastly, the small businesses that came in later from immigrant populations that were moving into our city, even if they could not hire, and me having a small business or 2, now I understood sometimes you just got to hire your family, right? Even if they all could not hire us, as long as they dealt fairly with our community. Those were the 3 things in my household. If you were all black owned, or if you hired black people, and if you couldn't, if you treated my community well by reinvesting. And that included everything from tutorial workshops and helps and sponsor tutors, buying sports uniforms, helping feed the hungry, all these things. So I never left the tradition of my community. When Maria Krish-Starfison, who's our superintendent, who's exiting now, called me earlier in the year, like, this pandemic has brought out a food desert shortage. We didn't even understand what's going on. I got on the phone with Freddie Figures from Figures Wireless, which is a black telecommunications company. Guy owns his own towers, builds his own phones, has done telemedicine, has built diabetes testers. It's just a great guy. Yet Freddie had nowhere to go to help. I got them hooked up. Not only did he help her, he said, Michael, the John Lewis district which is what Douglas is now housed in, used to be a 70, 80% home ownership district. And it was much more stable, and it was producing the type of students and the type of professionals we want. Now is a 70, 80% renters district. And our kids are moving around so much they can't even eat. Freddie said, I would love to sit down with the city of Atlanta and figure out a broadband solution so that kids will have an opportunity to have internet and be properly educated at home and won't miss a step. I think it's time for the circle of the black business community, the black worker class and middle class community to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize, and take our plan to federal government and say, not only is it enough for you to say, hey, because you're going to wipe away everybody's student loans. It's not just going to be black folks, even though we need it a lot. We know everybody's going to benefit from that. But after that, we have given so much to this country. Again, I'm watching Paul Robeson interviews. We have given so much to this country, I will say unequivocally, we deserve some special treatment. And I don't want welfare. I don't need social programs to take care of everything. I like social medicine, but not everything. What I do want to see, though, is a targeted investment in communities like the John Lewis District that says we're going to produce in 20 years. There's a 20-year plan. It's not a 2-month plan. It's not a 2-year plan, but you're going to see increases, I think, gradually in 2 months, 2 years, 12 years, and 20 years. We're going to put as a country a 20-year investment plan where we take kids who are pre-K and kindergarten and we follow those kids all the way through with the support and inspiration that they need. And on the other side of that, what you will have produced are people that are able to then, in a secular way, that circle of victory is, or virtuous circle, to come back to those communities, to be homeowners, to be the teachers, the doctors, the lawyers, the dentists you need. And what we will be able to do is replicate that in Atlanta, Jacksonville, Tampa, Birmingham, Charlotte. 54% of African Americans in this country live in the South. The fact that the South has food and education deserts, to me, is something systemically evil. And if we do not do something to change that narrative, our country is going to be the biggest, strongest, mightiest giant with a torn Achilles heel. And I don't care how good you run, how fast you are, and jump. If you're an athlete and you have no Achilles heel, you're not an athlete. You're just a bench warmer. This country has to stop seeing itself as the preeminent best on the helm of the world stage when we're not. We have a torn Achilles heel. And if we simply invest in the community whose free labor was the cornerstone of the country's wealth, not only will we have a healed Achilles heel, we will have a much faster, stronger athlete in terms of economics, education, and otherwise. And all it takes is making sure that the people who help build this country are truly a part of it by way of having opportunity.
Let me ask a question. Both to Robert and to Ursula, building off what Michael was saying. It's one thing to persuade the black community to create systems to help, for the black community to help the black community. It's another thing, and I want to be sensitive in how I say this. Part of what has to happen, frankly, is persuading the white community that they need to do this, right? That's a huge part of this. And the question is, whether there's a way to do that, not just about the moral imperative, because people are often selfish, they're not selfless. And there are people in the white community that look at quotas or look at targeted goals even, and they say, and you can get out the smallest violin you want if you want, and say, well, if we do this, it's going to be bad for me, right? I'm just saying that's what you hear. What do you say to that? Because part of this whole effort has to be to make the case.
Want to start, Robert, or you want me to start?
Why don't you start, Ursula? But I will come blazing behind.
Yeah, I'll swing in first with the quota story and make sure that we're clear. I think Michael said it to start with. It's interesting how this becomes a divisive issue when it's not you, particularly when it's a very big problem when it's us. Quotas are used every single day, all the time, particularly in government programs. So that's one. The second, we have a world where 60-something% of the population is not white and male. More than 60-something% of the population is not white and male. The wealth of the world, because it was built with this supremacist belief and structure, is concentrated in white and male. I don't want to fix everything all at once, right? So I'm not going to give you a quota on everything. But if we are fair, and if you have reasonable economic acumen, mathematical acumen, you understand that participating in a fight for greatness when 2/3 of the population is hindered, is hampering your progress, is a stupid idea. That's why after a long time, they start to include women because they're like, oh my God, half the freaking world is women. We can't make progress without bringing some of these women along with us. Quotas is the result of failure by business to do what they should be doing naturally. You don't have to have a quota if you do what you should be doing, which is be equitable, diverse, and inclusive. If you're not, then we're going to put quotas on you. California said, we tried it for years, Black people for hundreds of years, to wait and hope that the people who have it, who got it off the backs of Black people, Black and brown people, people who have it, to give some of it back. And I don't mean just, we'll work for it. But they said no. Government says, okay, no problem. Or shareholders say, okay, no problem. Board says, okay, no problem. We're going to force you to do it. You don't have to have quotas if you do the right thing. I don't think we're going to do the right thing fast enough. So quotas, bring them on. I think that they're just fine. Now, on the rest of the story about convincing people, I think the last time we were on the TV, I said, it's like asking a slave to please convince the slave owners to not have slavery anymore. I think go to psychology, people, have them deal with that. I just want equal opportunity based on skills and ability. You give us the skills and ability. By the way, if you don't give it to us, as Michael said, we'll actually have a virtuous circle where we create our own, then open it up, and we should be able to compete. I don't want to have to defend or explain to people why their unfair grasp of things has to be like, hopefully they'll be nice, but if they're not going to be nice, we have to have forcing functions. Some of the forcing functions are quotas. That's the safest, easiest way. There are other forcing functions that we don't want to talk about.
I think, and Ursula, thank you for that, because that is exactly right. And I will tell you, the thing that Martin Luther King said was that we are tied together in a single garment of destiny. Okay, Killer Mike talks to that and saying, if you have a weak Achilles heel, a 20 Achilles heel, I don't care what kind of athlete you are, you're not getting up, and you're not going to be able to do the things that you want to do, and that's America. There's never been a concerted effort on the part of the vast majority of white Americans to genuinely address equality for Black Americans.
Right.
Education, health, work, welfare. Okay, and it is a time right now. And Ursula and Mike are right, we will do what we can for our community. But our community does need some help. We need a modernization of a banking infrastructure that gets to our community. 70% of our communities don't have branch banks. And there's work that's being done, but we need that to work. We need that to happen. We need the government and people to charge those banks with capital. And we're seeing, Netflix and Reed Hastings and people saying, let me deposit $100 million. Bank of America, and JP Morgan, you had Jamie on earlier today. Let's go open 2,000 branches into these communities. But we need to also charge them with capital and loan capacity. Bill Bynum, who's now going to be on the board, or I guess the transition team with Biden, he runs an organization, CDFI. A year ago, they processed 50 loans. When they modernized the bank, the lending infrastructure, they basically processed over 7,400 loans in 4 months. That's what modernization and knowing your community can do. Those loans went for small to medium businesses. Average loan was $11,000, which changes the dimension of a small business in these communities. So part of what we have to do is get this concerted effort across many dimensions. And Mike, I'm going to get to you because Andrew and our alma mater, Cornell Agricultural School, we're working with them on some ways to spearhead racial equity across health and food in the U.S. Okay, so we'll put those connections together. But part of what we have to do is work and get institutions, businesses, corporations, and hopefully willing the federal government to actually come in and right some of these wrongs and frankly repair this Achilles that's been torn. Because otherwise we will be hampered in the face of global competition.
I want to tell white folks it's in your best interest. Now, I'm not going to waste too much time trying to convince you it's in your best interest. But if you look at the Olympics and you cheer, you don't care what color the athlete is. You want to win the track. You want to win the Olympics. You want us to have the most medals. You want us to run faster. And I don't mean us. I mean as athletes. Period. I don't care. I don't care what I'm watching. It could be lacrosse. It could be in anyone. If it has the United States on it, I'm cheering for it. 3 a.m. Start to look at the African American community. What we've done for baseball. And I'm not just talking about running and jumping on the field. We have made baseball $1 billion. What we've done for basketball, the NBA of the 60s is radically different. It's a global game now. We've done the same for football. These African-American minds can do the same things the legs and thighs and shoulders can do. But you have to see it like Paul Robeson said. I'm proud to be of African heritage. I'm as proud as any Scotsman or any Irishman, but I am affirmatively American. You are not denying Black Americans. You're denying all Americans. The fact that Black children know who John Brown is as early as 3rd grade, and you didn't know who John Brown was, and you're 30, 40 years old until Showtime showed you that, showed you has been miseducated as we are. Your educational level has put a ceiling that's been put on it so that you don't know the full history. If you don't know who Crispus Attucks is, if you don't know Alonzo Herndon started the Atlanta Life Insurance Company from a barbershop where he only served the white business class, he learned about bonds and stocks and insuring and then brought that to his community. He got those from the bigger companies. His company helped the bigger companies grow. We have to start to understand in this country that we're not a bunch of subgroups living next to each other. I am an African American. I am an American. If you invest in my community returns 10, 20, 1,000-fold to the greater community. And we're going to have to start helping, we don't have to, but white people are going to have to start understanding that we're not trying to replace white people. There's no grand design to do genocide or white people away. We don't want to shut down all white businesses. But when we say we want fair and equitable opportunity, it simply means don't hinder us from the start and then ask what's wrong at the end. Right. Don't say that there's no pipeline when you know most bankers have been involved in lacrosse playing. I didn't know that. I was like, so what's the sport for banking? It was like, well, most bankers are involved in lacrosse. I was like, that's why my wife's friends wanted to play lacrosse when we were organized, because I was like, man, I would have signed my kid up for lacrosse instead of football. But if we don't do those very simple things of opening the door and inviting, and on a very individual level, the same way Ursula got that call at 3 a.m, I got that call from people I knew. Mike, what do I do? That call should not be a distraught call at 3 a.m. It should be an engaging call once a week to say, Ursula, what do you think we could do about this? It should be a call and an engagement with other people that you know that aren't just the famous people. And I don't mean famous singing and dancing, famous within the corporate structure. You should seek to mentor and build that. I speak at white colleges and at Black colleges, and I tell white kids all the time, if you really want to help, the best thing you can do is leave the campus of MIT or Harvard or Yale, find a bright child or an average child with the potential to do really well, and mentor that child so that they take your place in this college when you leave. If you get a 9th grader as a college freshman, and you and that 9th grader do your education, if you guys are in an educational relationship together, matriculation, by the time you graduate Harvard, that child will be going to Morehouse and or Harvard, wherever he chooses to go. I prefer Morehouse and then Harvard for grad school. But just saying that individual relationships count, making sure that you open up that pipeline counts. And I think that the white community in this country has to get over their fear of revenge. If Black people have not tried to take revenge in 100 and some odd years and kill all white people in the streets, we're not going to do it now. If we've not closed off our communities like the Amish and refused to do business with you, that just means we want to be in the greater spectrum of business. So get past it and understand that when we grow, the whole community grows.
I will tell you, Andrew, if I can, it's been interesting to see, people like, the World Economic Forum and Treasurer Sean Wooten and others, Darren Walker, who are saying, you know what, let's actually put at the high end, i.e. where capital is being raised and delivered and actually making decisions as to who's the CEO, who's on those boards. They are all engaged now saying, what are the standards? What are the measurements? How are we going to hold them accountable? That's the biggest change that I've also seen. We see our kids in the streets who are saying, no, this is enough, but I'm also seeing our treasurers and our business roundtable and others standing back and saying, let's figure out ways to actually solve this problem where capital is actually being flowed into the communities, into businesses.
And one of the things, Andrew, I was going to say that I know we're running out of time is the question that you asked is one that that always makes me uncomfortable. And
makes me uncomfortable too.
Very rare. I'm very rarely uncomfortable. Very rarely uncomfortable because it actually almost pits. It pits it pits choices of equal things. This is not a zero-sum game here. It's not if we give money here, we don't give money here. The world has never been, the United States for sure, has never been a zero-sum society. We have 7.5 billion people here today living at a standard that's higher than when we had 1 million people on this planet. So we know it's not a zero-sum game, but we always kind of feel as though we have to explain it from that perspective. Well, we're gonna support the Black community or the Latin community or the poor community, and if we do that, that must mean we're not gonna support some other, in the short term that may be true, but we know for fact, by literally any fact that you study, that that's not the case over time, on average and over time. So we absolutely have to change the question. It's not give money here or give money here. It's how do you give money here and give money there? How do you give opportunity here and give opportunity there? It's not that we have to actually fight against each other. We don't have to have a scrum in the middle of the street for the scrap of food. That's not the country that we live in.
This has been a fabulous conversation. We're not going to end it just yet, because I do have to pivot for just a moment before we finish this conversation. Robert, you have been lauded, and rightly so, for the philanthropy that you have done and for using your voice on this very issue. We talked about doing this conversation a long, long time ago, and since that happened, just in the past couple weeks, there was a headline, and it's incumbent upon me to ask you about that headline, which is that you admitted to evading taxes, and you agreed to pay $139 million in back taxes, interest, and penalties. And I know that as part of that settlement, you can't talk directly to the settlement. But I would hope that you could talk to perhaps the lessons that you think you learned as a result of this experience, and also what impact you think it might have on your ability to have this kind of voice and participate in this kind of philanthropy.
Sure, and thanks for asking. A big part of life is, of course, if you make mistakes, you have to in some way clarify them, clear them up, and get beyond them. And like Masa San said yesterday, I can learn from my mistakes, and I have. It's clear to me that in order for me to focus on the problems of the present, I need to resolve the issues of the past and problems of the past. And the settlement offered me that ability to do so. So I've agreed to it, and I'm moving forward. I've made right with the government, and I'm absolutely committed to continuing my important work, my philanthropy, really driving, returns to all the stakeholders. My stakeholders in my company, my employees in my company. Like I say, I've apologized that has created any disturbance in that dynamic, but it is critically important that I and others step up now more than ever. And, that's where we are. I look to the future and am excited about the opportunity to clean up the past.
Okay, well, we will leave
if I could, before we get out, let me interject this. Because I'm a fan of both Ursula and Robert, and people like me and Cedar God have been firm in our defense of Robert. People make mistakes. I tell people all the time when they give me too many accolades. Hey, I'm going to mess up one day, and when I do, just allow me to apologize. Let's get back on our path. Right? I'll make right. But never forget that this country was founded by people who didn't want to pay taxes to a crown. Never forget that our forefathers, who we love and adore, who are on the dollar bills, oftentimes that we have in our pocket, with the exception of this guy, they were slave owners. Let us never forget the sins of our past, because when you do, you start to judge people as though your moral authority is higher. You start to castigate people for mistakes they've made, and you do not have an empathetic heart and that wants forgiveness. Now, as hard as it may be to forgive a rich guy, it matters to me that he did what he did at Morehouse before that. What he did for Morehouse wasn't, well, let me clean my image back up. It was his honest and true heart, right? So I just want to tell Black people on the other side of that, defend him vigorously when you're arguing in your barbershops. Because if you don't, you prevent the pathway for the next one. People are going to mess up, and trust me, I done had to pay the IRS more money. The IRS and baby mamas, Lord have mercy, they are my business partners. But I want to just say that I have been defending, and I will continue to defend. I appreciate you as a Morehouse guy, Robert. I thank you guys for letting me sit on here with y'all today, and just keep doing the good work, brother. Thank you.
And I think, let me tell you what, if you made a mistake, you fix it. I mean, this is not rocket science. I mean, at all. It is because it's him. You know, I mean, it is because it's him. It's not because, by the way, I mean, big mistake, small mistake, I don't know. Mistake for sure. I probably have, I can't pay $140 million because I don't have it. But proportionally, I've probably made as many mistakes as Robert has.
Absolutely.
Well, it is important that we actually step back and realize that, not that we're human, that's not what I'm talking about, that, yeah, you screwed up. If you screwed up, you say, got it, screwed up, fix it, go on, right?
That's it. Absolutely.
There's no way in the world to operate. There's no way in the world to operate. When people see me, they say to me, Ursula, you have such an amazing life. It's so, it's so perfect. I used to always tell them, you should be a fly on the wall in my house. When my husband was alive and we had the 2 kids in the house, you would have said, this is a crazy family. Because it's not, we are just regular old people, trying to make a way. And some of us have been more successful than others on the monetary side, right? Monetarily. We've been able, and therefore we have a big light shined on us. And I say to Robert, who I didn't follow all of the stories, just keep going, brother. I mean, I want to grow up and kind of be like you. I'm going to avoid the tax thing, but I want to be like you.
Thank you both. Thanks for all your support. And Andrew, thanks for your support as well.
Folks, we are going to end the conversation there. I am grateful for all of you joining us on this very, very important topic. I want to thank everybody who's joined us online for your questions and for your comments throughout this conversation. We will have LeBron James on the other side at 4 p.m. with Sherilyn Ifill in just a little bit. Thank you all for being with us. See you in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, Robert. Bye,
All
Ursula.
right, thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ursula.
All right. Bye, guys.